first culture of Mexico that we are going to be studying is the Olmec culture. Before we get into the details about the Olmecs, let's discuss historical time periods. Historians and scientists like to divide time into periods based on common themes that occurred in the location that is being studied. You've probably heard the terms Bronze Age, Classical Greek, Classical Roman, Medieval, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment period, the Industrial Revolution, etc. These are all different periods that have a common theme, or a common location, or a common culture. It helps us organize the messy complexities of human history. Mesoamerican history has been divided into several main time periods, most of which are based on the Mayan civilization, which is generally considered the most sophisticated civilization in the Americas. First is the Paleo-Indian time period, and this occurred when humans first inhabited the area, somewhere around 15,000 BCE, and that period lasted until the Archaic period, which is when humans began using agriculture and settling down. This happened around 7000 BCE and ended around 2000 BCE. This brings us out of prehistory into the time of organized cultures and civilizations, which eventually led the way to the very complex and advanced Mayan culture. Now, it's very important to remember that when we talk about the Mayans later, that they were not one big unified civilization like we think of Rome being. But instead, they were a bunch of smaller little city-states with different leaders that had a shared language, religion, and culture. I guess you could say the Mayans were more like the separate Greek city-states and less like a strong, unified Roman Empire. Anyway, anything that occurred before the Mayan time is considered the pre-classic or formative period, and this time period falls between 2000 BCE and 200 CE. Anything that occurred when the Mayan civilization was flourishing and thriving is referred to as the classic time period. And the Mayans were at their heyday between 200 CE and 1000 CE. And then anything that happened after the Mayan decline, but before the Spanish conquest, is called post-classic. And this occurred between 1000 CE and 1697 CE, when the last Mayan tribe was officially defeated by the Spanish. The Olmec culture is a pre-classic culture and flourished from about 1500 BCE until about 400 BCE. Most of our history studies dive deep into the cultures of Europe, the Near East, and China because we have a lot of archaeological evidence about these places. Because of the hot, humid climate in Mesoamerica, we don't have nearly as much evidence or information about any pre-Mayan civilizations. The Mayans were the first to really start using stone, and because of that, we have a pretty good idea of their culture based on their writing system that they carved into stone monuments and temples. The Olmecs used a little bit of stone, and what we know about them comes from the stone, but they mostly built their dwellings and temples and religious places out of mud and clay, which over time deteriorate. During the time that the Olmecs were flourishing, the civilizations in Europe and the Near East were having some serious problems at the conclusion of the Bronze Age. You can learn all about that by checking out the Bronze Age crash course video found in the extra section of this module.